So these are the three things to keep in mind. Okay? One is identify the stakeholders. Second is aligning on the decision framing and the problem statement. Turn the decision into a principle or a framework. And finally, the communicating the decision. Welcome everyone. So we kind of covered the different steps in the process. So identifying the decision type through the decision matrix, framing the decision, gathering the evidence with using the looking forward, reasoning backward approach, looking from the different lenses, evaluating different alternatives, and how to minimize negative consequences, reflecting on the decision. The final one is communicating the decision. So let's move on to communicating the decision and how we can do that effectively. So these are the three things to keep in mind. Okay. One is identify the stakeholders. Why? Because if you have too few stakeholders, it will kind of stifle objectives. You will not get a broader perspective. If you have too many, okay, then it will slow down progress. Which is why identifying the relevant stakeholders is very, very important and involving them in the decision-making process. Second is aligning on the decision framing and the problem statement. Turn the decision into a principle or a framework, which we've already discussed. And finally, the communicating the decision using what we will talk about, the Minto Pyramid. Okay. So first one, let's go into how do you go about identifying your stakeholders. The y-axis is interest of the stakeholder in your work. And the x-axis is their power or the influence that they have on your work. Each of these four quadrants have different types of stakeholders and their needs are very different. Okay. You have people who are having a very high interest and kind of a low power. Okay. These are people, for example, customer support. Any product feature that you roll out perhaps has an impact on the customer, and because of that, it might lead to certain queries coming in for customer support. And many a times, customer support is often not in the know. I'm guessing a lot of folks would also be able to relate to it. We usually ignore customer support when we are building out product features without knowing that it perhaps indirectly affects them a lot, right? And they would be really interested in knowing, right? The second is kind of, you have what we call as the players, right? Who are having a high interest and a high influence. Like your manager might be an example, or if you're working across different functions, engineering, business, design, these are people who you would be very closely kind of working with, okay? And then you have the context setters and the crowd. And if you look at it, the strategy for each one of them is going to be very, very different. You have to involve, you have to consult, and you have to inform, okay? Very different kinds of strategies. You involve some of them, those who have a high interest but low influence. You collaborate with the ones with high interest and high influence. You consult folks with a high influence but low interest. And you inform people, those who have a low interest and a low influence. This is just to kind of give you a sense that many a times we have these blind spots, especially if you look at legal, finance, customer support, accounting, right? These are often functions in product development which we don't think about directly. We think about only in a very reactionary way, right? In a very reactive manner. But keep in mind, these are also stakeholders, and your communication strategy needs to be different across different kinds of stakeholders. For example, if you are having someone with a very high interest and a high influence quadrant, that means that you need to keep updating them very, very regularly, right? Because they are very high interest and high influence. You cannot afford to throw any surprises at them, and they would also not want any surprises because they can very easily derail kind of your project that way. So something to kind of keep in mind. That's where, again, thinking from a multidisciplinary perspective is very, very essential. If you miss out one particular core kind of stakeholder here, and that person might be caught by surprise, and that person might just derail the entire decision. So very important for you to kind of keep that in mind. So that being said, let's see now how you can effectively communicate. So this is what I had written, okay, to the leadership. That's the first part, is the framing. Second part, recommendation. So recommendation is do not onboard onto WhatsApp in the current state. That's the recommendation. And what are the three sub-bullets here? Supporting arguments, right? So that's basically the way to think about it. You go with the framing. then the recommendation, and then the supporting argument. Okay, and this is basically what we call as the Minto Pyramid. It's because Barbara Minto, who is a known name in the consulting space, was a partner at McKinsey. She came up with it, wherein you first talk about the framing, then the recommendation, and follow up the recommendation with the supporting argument. There's a reason why the Minto Pyramid is so very popular. It is because of this entire thing. It's easy to follow. If you communicate your decision in a very articulate manner, easy to understand manner, people are able to understand your thought process, right? It becomes so very easy to actually align on the decision. So if you look at it, if this is an email that you get, right? I'm guessing it will be very easy for you to first understand how I'm thinking about it, right? We should think about the following. These are the 3 pointers. Now, you either align on this or you don't align on it, right? If you think that these 3 pointers are not something which I align on and something else has been missing, then you would not even go on to the next one. You will basically say, okay, Arindam, this is something which we need to think something different, right? But mostly, you get it that this is the way it is being thought through, right? No yes, no answer. These are the 3 parameters on which I'm thinking, 3 principles on which I'm thinking, right? And keeping that in mind, this is the recommendation, right? It hits you first that this is the recommendation. And then why is this a recommendation? These are the supporting arguments. It's very, very easy to follow for a reader. That's why this can be a very, very powerful tool for you guys to adopt. Okay? So that's basically the Minto Pyramid principle. And that brings us to kind of the last step, which is done, which is what we were talking about, communicating the decision. So we've gone through all the 8 steps in the process. I hope all of you guys had a good time. Thank you once again.